Let's start off with what's going on with the shilling. 85 shillings, 75. Some earlier in the week had said definitely this week we're going to see 86 shillings to the dollar. What do you make of the exchange rate and the policy in terms of what to do with the shilling?
The shilling actually did hit a high of 86.70 today at some point during the day, but closed at 85.70. Looking at the shilling, I think, well, the reason that the governor insists that they'll not interfere in the market is because they attribute the volatility to mostly driven by speculators. He says that the fundamentals do not support such levels for the shilling, and within time it should stabilize.
I mean, let's continue on this tack because, I mean, obviously yesterday and also today we're seeing the shilling pairing some gains against the dollar, but there's been concerns about the general depreciation of this currency. It's the lowest level in a matter of years, and there's just a sense that the CBK should do something about it. They insist that the fundamentals are strong, that the shilling is merely responding to events in Japan, the market's tumbling a bit, situation in North Africa, and once all these crises are stabilized, the shilling will stabilize, will it?
What we can say is basically the levels we're seeing now can be attributed to speculators. Fine, there are all these external factors putting pressure on the shilling, but the levels we've seen of as highs of 86.70 can be attributed to speculators, and with the governor coming in and calming the market and telling people that they're not going to interfere and that the shilling will stabilize, that was pretty good. I mean, we saw the reaction yesterday, so I think with time we should see it stabilize.
Okay, what else are we likely to see just by way of monetary policy in Kenya? The policy basically is to retain a loose stance, but already the fears of inflation creeping in, as in many ways signaled by the situation with the shilling. Fears of inflation coming in from high oil prices. We know that the petrol price has also been hiked for this month.
Going forward, okay, the indications we're getting from the central bank is they'll keep the loose policy will stand for the time being. And I think there's an MPC meeting later on this month on the 23rd, if I'm not wrong. And we do expect them to not drastically change the policy going forward. The governor insists that this is the effects we're seeing on interest rates, the currency, and inflation. All these factors are short-term and should stabilize as we move to the last quarter of this financial year.
All right, let's move beyond the CBK and monetary policy and talk about what's been happening on the equities front. I mean, for the last few days, the market had closed below the 4,000 mark. So I think the figures we're seeing today do signal some confidence. But who's buying in this market?
When the market, what happened with the index, when it went below the 4,000 point resistance level, we saw quite a number of retailers and even foreign players coming to the market to take up positions because a lot of the counters were really at discounted prices. So like today we saw foreigners coming into Safaricom, KPLC, and the financial sector. But retailers have also been very active. They've really been pushing the market. And hopefully going forward towards the end of the month, we do hope to see fund managers coming back in to take up positions.
All right,
especially on the dividend counters.
Obviously, I mean, some of the assets are now looking fairly cheap. For those coming into the market, which sectors look interesting? Because the most active stocks today were KPLC and Safaricom, the usual suspects, some would argue.
Especially for foreigners who have shown a lot of interest in those counters, but also for investors looking for dividend income. The financial sector have paid out massive dividends this year, so those would also be good counters to look at.
Okay, talk to us about Safaricom. We know that in recent weeks they've lost a bit of market share with the rivalry that's come in from Airtel and Orange and others, and that's prompted the CEO to look at restructuring management. Yesterday, obviously, investors were impressed with some of these efforts, but what does Safaricom need to do to stay in the game?
I think it's necessary. When Safaricom was, I would say, mostly a monopoly for years, and they had the big Safaricom, big spending, but with competition coming in, I think going forward they need to have a lean and mean team, and that's what the CEO is actually doing.
Okay, we've also seen energy stocks do particularly well. Yesterday, Kengen was one of the investor favorites, and I think it has a lot to do with what we're saying about rising oil prices, petrol prices, etc. But what else is happening on the industrial front?
The industrial front, I think with what's happened, the shilling, with what's been happening with the currency, a lot of industries have actually been hedging. But I wouldn't say there's that much interest. Most people have been sitting back and watching the market for that time being going forward. And I still think that most people will come in for dividend income.
Okay, quickly and finally, bond market, what's happening on that front? New issuances, what are the yields that we're seeing in Kenya?
I think that next week is the closing. The CBK is reopening the 30-year and 5-year that were issued earlier this year. Of course, they're coming in to borrow much cheaper at the same levels that they first issued the papers. It's caused the market to be a bit jittery, with most investors choosing to stay out and wait for the primary on a clear indication on what way the rates are going. But there won't be so much competition for funds during this primary, as we are seeing about 8.5 billion in redemptions. So the new borrowing will only be about 9.5 billion. And also with a lot of liquidity coming in next week, we expect to see a lot of chasing of papers by investors over the next 2 weeks.